So what I have here, information I have here for the global audience in terms of this participation is the story which I've just, or like the quote which I've just mentioned. But the story I want to tell is something that happened back in 1963. That was on the street of Washington, D.C. Some of you may have remembered all of that. Yeah, a movement that actually changed the global silence of how the minority can be treated. And Martin Luther King Jr. actually once mentioned, he said, the greatest enemy is for you to remain silent and not to be a participant. So I think with everybody here, it is time for Africa to be a participant, not just a passive mover in the world stage. Why Africa? Why do they need that voice? Well, Africa is a home of over 1 billion people. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of market. Even Africa internally can trade within itself. As the previous speaker mentioned, we are not beggars. We are actually provider and sustainer of the global wealth. Yes, African product and African talents are world class. I think is it a household just mentioned earlier, being United States as an Africa, more educated, well talented, been to so many different. Why should we be hiding away with all these opportunities and the possibility that we have in the world stage? Africa dominates the mineral and other natural resources. Every single structure, every single home, every single machinery that had ever been produced, part of those particulars and the minerals and the ingredient that were used, which are part of the component, were actually drawn from the land of Africa. Africa is the world next economic frontier. Make no mistake, but the leader need to be able to stand upright. They need to be able to stand for what is right, not just indulging in their own silent, drunk in position and see if they're drunk, not knowing what is actually happening. What Nelson Mandela in his was called failed leadership. If I could just allow me to quote this Noam Chomsky, he's saying that there are no poor countries, only failed systems for managing resources. Isn't that the case with Africa? It is not because Africa is poor. Yeah, I've challenged many people in various conferences when they make derogatory remark about Africa. I said, no, Africa is not poor. Keep quiet. Take that out of your head. Yes, it is poorly managed. That's a fundamental difference. And this is what Noam is actually making a reference to, that Africa is not a poor place, but the system have failed the inhabitant and the Commonwealth beneficiary of that particular continent. So is there a time that Africa need to rise up? And people need to rise up. Yes, we can see from all the various corners and the telltale sign that a lot of movement are actually taking place with the young people and people in the diaspora, and even within the African themselves. Some of the leaders are now actually have woken up from the slumber they have been in. Yes, it's about time. And the time is now that Africa should be able to. So, what are the principles of Ubuntu? Well, it is because you are. Wow, isn't that amazing? So, it's a philosophy, it's a way of life which is connected to humanity, unity, compassion, and mutual responsibility. Yes, as a nation or nations of people in Africa, they actually own that responsibility. They need that interconnectedness, even within themselves. Because if you have the fire within, it's actually more dangerous than the fire from the outside, outside the camp. You agree with me, don't you? Yeah. Ubuntu actually reminds us of a nation that flourishes when others flourish. Yes, diplomacy must build relationships, not dominance. Well, that's what I call the Western. Yeah, people call it the colonial master, but I don't use that phrase. It's not a master, but more like invaders. Why would you like invader to actually dominate and trample upon your own sovereignty? Why for so long? Why do we not taking the mantle within ourselves and deal decisively as leaders? Because leaders are those who actually fight for their own people. They do for their people what their people cannot do for themselves. Yes, this is what it's all about. So leadership must therefore, in the African context, require that commitment and not about selfishness, not about gaining the next political position. But that's what the Seto Code is at the moment. Ubuntu is therefore in the African continent human dignity, cooperation, strategic interdependence. And that's what it's all about. That should be the way forward. A leader need to appreciate and do exactly just that. How about diplomacy in this sense? Well, was it not Mahatma Gandhi that actually once mentioned that it is the principles of fighting without a gun? Well, Africa has a lot of ammunition. Africa has a lot of resources that they can use to fight in terms of their diplomatic negotiations. Should not be in a position of having a weaker or a very weak, feeble, beggarly position, but a position of, yes, dominance in a sense that we play as an equal partner. That's what the African leaders need. Sitting on the GS table, yes, sitting is good, but team participation is what is required right now. Team representation for the real people. Team advocacy. Yes, why do you need to advocate? Yeah, you need to advocate because you're leaders. And advocacy represents the ability for you to be able to negotiate on behalf or in behalf of other people who are not able to position themselves. The African leader, the time is now right. It is time right now for them to be able to do that, to negotiate, go for a dialogue, meaningful relationship between all the nations, not in a beggarly seat that doesn't. Well, as we've already mentioned, Africa must confront the drawback they have. Failed leadership, weak and failed system. Well, the word C, I mean, with capital letter, that need to be, addressed right from the grassroots. Not just the people, the politicians on their desk, but even the real people at the grassroots. How is this one? What message do we actually have to deliver to the people, the African continent origin, that we have the capability and we can build a system that is sustainable, a system that cater for the commonwealth of all the people, a system that promotes collaborative management in the process. Yes, we all have that responsibility. We all have that to participation. We all have, as a diverse people, like this was a story I was telling you earlier, diverse but converse at the same time. That was a part of the marches back in 1963, where Martin Luther King Jr. says, silence is not the answer. And in fact, he had a dream, but that dream is coming true incrementally. But we are way, way behind in terms of what it is. So the time has come where those sitting on the table in terms of making a decision for us is so important. So why the diplomacy? And why is it the way forward? Well, it is a way forward because when you sit idle without doing anything, other people will make the decision for you. And this is exactly what is happening. So, prioritization of negotiation, not fragmented into 54 different clans and states, but a united. So, what's the purpose of AU, African unity? What's the purpose of ECOWAS? What's the purpose of the East African? All of these are all disjointed in so many different ways. But can we come strategically together, integratively, and having that strategic interdependence, African within the Africa itself, even before it spread out externally, is that a possibility? How about the leadership situation? And what are the goals? What are the ideologies that African, what we have in terms of technology? Do we have any African country that has to say, yeah, in 10 years' time, we want to be known for technological this, technological that? Highly fragmented, and brain drain is the order of the day. But it is now time for us to now achieving brain gain in the process. So even we in the diaspora need to be able to rethink. Yeah, opportunities and possibilities may not be given to you by the power that are in at that point in time, but through the storm and through inclemency of the weather, God has given us the right umbrella to cope, not stopping the rain. So he's giving us the brain, giving us the people. Yeah, this is a strong umbrella we need in order to be able to withstand the very difficult, challenging situation in the African environment. Yes, Africa need the narrative and the dignity, the sovereignty that they required, not beggarly, not honky down when we need to face the real decision making. So, on my final note, and this is what it is, and this is fundamental. This message not only be kept on this particular, for those of you in position of authority, take it to the 54 leaders, countries, and the people in general, that in the spirit of Ubuntu, humanity is intertwined with our progress if our progress is shared. That's what it's all about. African voice is not optional. African seat is not a favor. Africa's leadership is not negotiable. Yes, it should be part and intertwined, integrated into the fabric of the world decision making because we have the resources. We are well positioned. We are well endowed in human, in natural resources, in fertility of our land, and many, many other. If resources are not well deployed, then somebody else will use them and possibly even have them wasted. The world needs Africa's wisdom, power, resources, youth, and vision. Isn't that really amazing? This is what we stand for as Africa. And this is what the whole point is all about as Africa. Yeah, my name is Dr. Sonia Hansi. I'm a practicing functional medicine practitioner based here in the UK. And when I see a lot of things that's actually happening, going to Africa, and some of the things that were not really, then you begin to question yourself. Yes, we want to be positioned, not only helping people in terms of political diplomacy, but also in terms of health. And this is one of my driving forces, delivering healthcare system with any medical intervention that people may have. And right now, my motion is to go to Africa, create a lot of doctors in a functional way, and also helping people to develop around their own businesses. So satisfying two things, two needs of people. Those two needs are fundamental. Without those two needs, no one will survive. Health and wealth. So I hope this has been an amazing one. So going back to the original quote, indecision is the greatest enemy. African leader must decide now and be a participant actively, effectively, and not just a docile listener sitting on the table.